Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Cox, Associate Vice Chancellor for Faculty Affairs, and welcome to this session. My office, the Office of Faculty Affairs, has responsibility for the academic review of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication that is currently underway. That review process involves two different faculty committees. Today, we have representatives of one of those committees, the Program Discontinuance Committee, and I'm going to introduce them and talk more about them. But before I do that, I want to remind you that there is another committee, a Information, Communication, and Technology Exploratory Committee. The Chancellor asked the Provost to create this committee at the same time as he asked for the launch of the Program Discontinuance process. This exploratory committee is charged with looking at the future educational and intellectual opportunities in the area of information, communication, and technology. That faculty committee is chaired by Meryl Leslie, a professor of theater and dance, a former interim chancellor, vice chancellor, and dean, and he was in fact dean of the School of Professional Education that included the Journalism School in California. So that group is meeting for the first time. It was just formed last week. It is meeting this Friday for an organizational meeting, and it will very shortly be announcing its own public meetings for general meetings with faculty, but it will also be traveling to various parts of the campus to meet directly with faculty. So do look for those announcements. They will be very interested in hearing from you in their process, which again is a kind of a visioning process looking to the future. While we're looking to the future, the Chancellor has also asked that we begin the formal process created under Regent policy of program discontinuance. Program discontinuance was created by the Regent so that there was an orderly way for the campuses to look at programs that may need to be ended in their current form. It was created to ensure, amongst other things, that there was faculty input into that process, and that's one of the functions of this meeting today. Under campus policy, that committee is made up in the first instance of the members of the Standing Program Review Committee, the Academic Review and Planning Advisory Committee, or RPAC, and policy also states that there are additional members of that committee. Associate Vice Chancellor for Undergraduate Education, Mike Grant, is there to make sure that we are paying attention to undergraduate matters. The Dean of Graduate School, John Stevenson, make sure we look at graduate issues. And then the interim Vice Chancellor for Equity, Diversity, and Community Engagement, Bob Boswell, who couldn't be here today, but is there to make sure that we're paying attention to the impact on diversity by any closure of any unit. The rest of the committee are members of the faculty who are standing members of the Program Review Committee. 3 members of that committee have been given the task of forming a subcommittee for gathering information around program discontinuance, reporting that back to the full committee, and drafting an initial report. The 3 members of that subcommittee, and we owe them a great debt. They're doing a huge amount of work in a kind of task that no faculty member really wants to take on. But we have Bob Spencer from Psychology and Neuroscience, Debbie Hollis from University Libraries, and I believe entering late from class will be Sam Fitch from Political Science. So the program discontinuance process essentially asks this campus level committee to look at a number of issues as set forth by the Regents. There are 3 different ways in which you can approach program discontinuance. The Chancellor has asked us to look at 2 areas, budgetary matters and strategic realignment. Under the budgetary issues are largely matters of fact, and the committee has requested information from the appropriate offices on campus. If anybody wants to talk about the budget, that's fine, but generally most of us don't really have a great deal of information about budget matters. The other set of issues under strategic realignment are outlined on the sheet that was handed out as you came in. We're interested in hearing whatever you have to tell us about the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, but the committee is tasked with responding to these issues, so if you have anything to say about them, that would be particularly appreciated. Now, if you have things you wish to say to the committee that you don't want to say in a public meeting, or it's just too long to say in a public meeting, or you think of later, you can contact the committee through a dedicated email. It's input@colorado.edu. That will also be used by the exploratory committee, but it provides you a way to communicate with the committee outside of these public meetings. So, today we're focusing on the question of whether or not the School of Journalism and Mass Communication should be discontinued. It's important to remember that there has not been a decision made about program discontinuance. This is an investigative process. The Chancellor has genuinely not made up his mind. Provost, I can assure you, has not made up his mind. The committee certainly has not made up their mind. So that's why we're interested in hearing from all of you. We're, of course, happy to hear about visions for the future, but that's really the task of the exploratory committee. This group is really tasked with trying to figure out, in a kind of the basic question, is whether it is appropriate in the best, appropriate to the mission of the university and in its best interest to continue to offer the degrees in journalism as they are currently constituted and through the current structure that we have. So I think with that as prelude, we're happy to answer procedural questions if you have them, but we would like to focus on matters of substance. We're going to ask people to come up. We don't have that many people. We can probably just use the central microphone and come up and say whatever you'd like us to hear. It is important to remember, I mean, this is a faculty committee, as is the other one. These are processes. The two review processes that are underway are driven by the faculty, and they're, of course, particularly interested in hearing from the faculty. We'll be talking with students next week and meeting with the staff in journalism and mass communication next week as well. So with that, I'll just open up the mics, and we're happy to hear from you.
It seems like I'm almost in front of you, John.
Whisper in my ear.
Whisper in your ear. My name is Steve Jones. I'm on the faculty in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication and the assistant dean in the school. My primary responsibility is for the undergraduate program. And what I wanted to do was a couple of things. One is to describe the undergraduate program. And I know you have some of this information. You may not have all of it. And then secondly, in that description, also to respond to a couple of questions that were raised yesterday. Debbie, I think you raised one about how we compare to CSU, and then there was another question raised about the school versus department concept and some of the advantages that we might see there. And so I will apologize if this is repeating some of the things you have in your written material, but we'll try to get it out. And Jeff, you can tell me if I need to stop at any point along the way. We are an accredited program, one of 111 in the country, out of approximately 650 programs that offer journalism and mass communication. There are only 2 accredited programs in the state, our program and CSU's program in journalism and technical communication. When we have potential students coming to the campus to look into our program in the CU Sampler and CU Student for a Day, I tell the parents of the prospective students that there are a couple of aspects of accreditation that they need to know about. The first is that out of the 120 hours that we require for graduation, a minimum of 80 hours must be taken outside the school. And of that 80, 65 must be in the College of Arts and Sciences. The students do the A&S core as part of the outside hours. The goal that we stress to the parents is that the students need to have a broad-based liberal arts education in addition to the concentration in their SJMC courses. And this is one way to help ensure that. The second that we tell them is that with our skills courses, those courses that teach writing, that teach broadcast production, that teach creative concepts in advertising, that teach students how to research and how to verify what they have found. Those courses are limited to 20 students by our accredited guidelines, and the recommendation is roughly 15. And so we tell the students and the parents that they're going to get a lot of close contact with their faculty members when they're dealing with these classes. I also tell the parents two other things. As long as we can get their son or daughter admitted to the school, and I'm going to talk about the competitive application here in a second, by the start of their junior year, we can get them finished in 4 years. We have a heavy concentration at the junior and senior level versus the freshman and sophomore level. And I also tell them that we have a really high graduation rate. Once a student is admitted to the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, 82% of them are graduating within their 4-year time period, which exceeds the campus average and far exceeds the national average. Because of the limitations with the size of the classes, we have to be very careful about how many students we admit. And so we do have a competitive application process into the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. We have approximately 650 majors and 750 pre-majors. Now, the numbers I don't have specific for you because of all 5 of you know, if you go to SIS, you will get 1 set of numbers. If you go to ISIS, you get a 2nd set of numbers. And if you go to PBA, you'll get a 3rd set of numbers. And we have all 3 sets of numbers. They're all close, but they're not all exact. And so we're looking at approximations in terms of our student population. This summer, for the entering freshman class, PBA estimated that we would have 118 new pre-journalism majors. We actually had 159 new pre-journalism majors wanting to come here and apply to the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. When students apply, they apply directly to one of our 5 sequences: advertising, broadcast news, broadcast production, media studies, or news editorial. The students must have completed the 2 prerequisite courses, have a minimum of 30 hours, either completed or in progress, at least a 2.25 overall grade point average and a 2.5 in journalism courses, and they must write an essay. The essay has the same amount of weight as the GPA, and it can make or break a student depending upon where they happen to fall in the competitive scheme of things. We have 2 faculty members from each sequence that review all applications to that sequence. They then get together and decide which students should be admitted, and then they make that recommendation to me. They know the numbers based upon the people that we have graduating and what we think we can handle in our classes. We admit between 55 and 65% of the students who apply. That fluctuates by semester, and it also differs by sequence. And currently, advertising is our most sought after sequence and has about a 40% acceptance rate. But what we find is that we run in cycles of about every 5 years, and so some years it'll be news editorial, some years broadcasting, some years advertising. Of those admitted, the average overall grade point is 3.1 to 3.3. The average journalism grade point is 3.4 to 3.5, and the average number of hours completed or in progress is 57. So it tends to favor the up-and-coming junior. Students may transfer directly into the SJMC from other institutions. They must have a 3.0 overall on at least 30 hours, and they must have a 3.0 in all journalism mass communication courses. A limited number of students are admitted directly to the school as freshmen. This was based upon an idea that the University of Missouri's School of Journalism started about 10 years ago, and it was to try to entice the best and the brightest of the high school students to come to their institution. In discussions with their associate dean, we were able to craft something similar here. Our goal was to have 25 students. The first year we had 44, the next year we had 42, the next year 32, last year 26, this year we only had 17. But to be admitted directly as a dean scholar into the School of Journalism and Mass Communication, the students must have a minimum 28 English on the ACT or 630 verbal on the SAT, generally a 3.7 or higher high school grade point average, and then the real kicker is the projected CU GPA, which is determined by planning, budget, and analysis. Students must have a 3.3 projected CU GPA on the basis of a 3.6. So it makes it one of the most difficult programs in the university campus to get into with that criteria. In comparison to CSU, the bulk of their students are direct admits as freshmen, and they use a scale that's similar to the index value that is used by CCHE. So it's based upon the ACT or SAT scores, their high school GPA, and if they fall within a particular range, they're admitted directly into the journalism and technical communication program. If they transfer directly into that program, they have to have a C or better in the 2 prerequisite courses and an overall GPA of 2.5. And if they go through the IUT process, which is where we get most of our students, they have to have strong B's and C's. I'm not sure what that means, but that's what they said in their catalog. And a 2.9 overall on at least 12 hours of CSU credit. So between the 2 schools, we have much higher demands in terms of GPA and application processes than what CSU would have. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was the school concept versus a department concept. And you can't argue that we could function as a department as well as a school. There are some advantages to a school, and a lot of those advantages deal with efficiencies because we are the bureaucracy if we're a school rather than having to go through another layer of bureaucracy as we try to make decisions. I think this has some ramifications, and there are just a couple of things that I would point out that we've done over the last few years that we've been able to do because of the school status. The first is the limited admissions, being able to restrict the students that come into the school. I know that Arts and Sciences has one department that does this, and it was based upon our process with the pre-journalism students. I'm not sure how well that is working, but that would be something that the Dean of Arts and Sciences would have to tell you. I think the issue there is that when you have some departments that do have admissions restrictions and others that don't, there's a little bit of a give and take as to why don't we have that, and so that could be an issue. Secondly, we were able to do in 1988 what most programs could not do in that whole time period until a year and a half ago when things changed. And as a school in 1988, we adopted the degree audit from SIS and applied it to our entire school so that all the undergraduate sequences, the students could go to SIS, they could look at their degree audit and see how they were progressing in their programs. Not all departments and none of the other schools and colleges fully adopted the SIS degree audit until we switched to DARS and the ISIS audit a year and a half ago. And that transition was very easy for us. We were the first program to adopt the ISIS degree audit for our students entirely. And our students have been using that audit now for the last 18 months. And that's helped immensely in terms of what they're able to do. We were also able as a school to participate fully in the ISIS conversion, even to the point that if you were to go into my 2 classes that I teach this semester and see who the instructors are, you would see that I'm the primary instructor, but the registrar and the associate registrar are secondary instructors so that they can use my classes to demonstrate to the faculty how you go into your faculty center and are able to look at your roster and be able to work with that roster. And I think that we were able to do that, again, because of our makeup. The last 2 issues, very quickly. One is adjuncts. And as a school, we are able to deal more directly with the adjunct population that we hire. We made a decision as a faculty many years ago that it was good to have adjuncts teaching a course for us, particularly some of our skills courses, because they come right out of the profession and they teach those courses and they're teaching the students what they're doing on a daily basis. And then the last thing, which allows us as a school, we are able to respond to our students much more quickly, particularly when we're dealing with add drop and all the scheduling issues that go on, because that comes directly to us rather than having to go from a department structure then to the associate or assistant dean and up the ladder as it goes. That is, I'm done.
Great. Thank you. Anybody have questions?
As a follow-up, do you see any resource implications for delivery of the undergraduate programs if you're a school versus a department in, say, A&S?
Well, there could very much, there could very easily be resource implications, particularly when you're competing with other departments for some of the resources, like the adjunct funding, capital equipment funding, computer funding, which our program is heavily based on in terms of the different sequences that we have. And so when you're a part of another entity and you're competing for that, that makes it a little bit more difficult to get those funds.
And any restrictions of what's available, maybe with the cross-disciplinary cross-listing of courses?
You know, if the right mix of programs are there, there should be a cross-disciplinary utilization of things like equipment and adjuncts and you know, guest speakers and all of those sorts of things. And so that could be an advantage in the long run. Is that getting it?
Yeah.
Question.
Could you mentioned the number of hours outside the school. Can you remind us the number of hours in the major?
The maximum number within the major is 40. The minimum number is 28. And most of our students graduate right around 34 or 35.
And within the major, there are courses taken by all students and then courses that are blocked in the sequences?
Correct.
There are about 12 hours.
12 hours that are taken by, well, actually there's 9 hours taken by all majors that are specific courses, and then an additional 3 hours that are what's called conceptual upper division journalism classes like ethics or international mass comm or public opinion. So students have a choice with that remaining 3 hours that's part of their 12-hour basic core.
And then there's a 12-hour in the sequence, basically.
12 to 15 hours within the sequence and then the elective hours. And that's under the current curriculum structure. The faculty did approve a new curriculum that's going to change that rather dramatically.
Okay, and we've asked to see that.
There'll be about 15 hours that everyone has to take.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you.
Okay.
Steve. Anyone else?
This is too close.
John suggested this was kind of like a Senate hearing yesterday, and it's an unfortunate setup, but we had no idea how many people were going to come. Also, please, I should note that this is not the media here filming this event. This is we're taping this for our records, so it's not you're not going to show up on the evening news.
I think poker players don't turn their back to this many people. So I'm a little nervous here, but my name is Jim White. I'm the director of the Institute of Arctic and Alpine Research. I'll raise this up. No, I won't raise it up. I'm also a member. I'm a faculty in geological sciences and environmental studies. So I am not in journalism. So I come here as a concerned and interested member of the university faculty. I have a few points I'd like to make. One of them is I think it's very important that we keep the name journalism for a number of reasons. One has to do with visibility. It's an unambiguous term that students can see and know where to apply. It sends a clear message to potential funding, not only agencies but foundations, that this is what we do. And I'll address in a moment whether we need journalists. I feel very uncomfortable at this moment. But I want to point out some lessons that we have learned in the institutes and in the interdisciplinary areas of the campus when it comes to what is in a name. We have I think, most number of in terms of dollars grants. We have the highest number of publications and citations in the area of the environment here at the University of Colorado Boulder. That's not well known. When people look around the world and they say, okay, who's number one in terms of funding? Who's number one in terms of publications? Who's number one in terms of citations? You don't see the University of Colorado Boulder. You have to dig into the NSF statistics, and there we are. Part of the reason for that is that we don't have a unified thing called environmental. We have a whole bunch of things called environmental and some things not called environmental. And so what is in a name turns out to be very important. And if we're thinking about removing that journalism name from the entity here, I think we need to think long and hard about whether or not we're going to be losing a lot of built-in visibility among students, among funding agencies, et cetera, that is very, very valuable to us. And frankly, it comes under the branding, but it's extremely important. I think you'll get this exact same argument if you were to talk to Dan Baker and LASP about aerospace, and I've heard those exact terms from him, and I've heard them from Leslie Leinwan in other areas of life sciences. We have expertise, we have fantastic expertise, but if we're not known for that, then we don't draw in the best students, we don't get the best in terms of our ability to pull in money. So it is important that we have the name. And then the question becomes, if you pull the name journalism and you do something else with it, well, fine. I mean, you know, that's the visioning committee. I think are going to look more at that. But then you got to wonder, okay, are we really, you know, doing more than rearranging the deck chairs on the USS Colorado here? My own personal opinion, we absolutely need journalists. I think that the problems with journalism today, and I've mentioned this to John before, lie not in the School of Journalism, but they lie in probably the School of Business, if you had to point. You know, how do you provide the services that journalists provide in a modern new media environment and do it and make money? And it's a money issue. I don't think it's necessarily a quantity issue, a quality issue. We more than ever need, I think, high quality journalists, the free press, the ability of the press to investigate what goes on in government in particular is of utmost importance. And I think if we scale that back in any way and call it another name even, I think we'll be losing. So I would encourage you to think about that. I want to make another point in terms of, I think that part of the reason why we are concerned about journalism here is that I don't think there's as many outlets for bringing together different types of communication and communication sciences and studies around campus. And I think one of the motivating factors behind rethinking journalism is, you know, what are the other pieces of communication here in terms of media, in terms of other things that we could bring into here. And we do have very excellent departments around campus that do other forms of communication. And quite frankly, I think that one of the ways to rethink this would be to rethink it as an institute rather than a rearranging of a school. We have very strong examples of how institutes can bring together like-minded researchers from around campus and give them another outlet. And I don't think that we've done that as well as we could in communications. Atlas, as far as I understand, has been an attempt to do that in part, but quite frankly, I'm going to get shot here. I don't know that, you know, I think broadly viewed the campus doesn't quite know what Atlas is. And consequently, I think we miss great opportunities to bring different areas of media studies, journalism, communications, et cetera, together. And I would even think about if you want to rearrange something here, perhaps it is that institute outlet that we ought to rearrange and rename and provide it with a name of communications or whatever in order to rethink how we do this. I would point out that from a cost point of view, which is one of the points on here, I just got handed this piece of paper, from a cost point of view, starting an institute is a whole lot cheaper because as an institute director, I can tell you that we have to raise all of the funds that run the institute from grants and contracts. And so that does not have university resources pouring into it. Find just a couple of smaller, not smaller, but I think are important points. One is, I don't know that it's as well known as it could and should be that there are parts of the School of Journalism that have tentacles that go out across campus. And I'll just give you my own personal perspective. The Center for Environmental Journalism is a group that I've worked with for years. They directly address points 1 through 4 on this piece of paper. They're central to the campus mission in their work in environmental journalism. Their role of the program in campus or college strategic plan, if you look at the master plan, if you look at 2030, you see the word sustainability plastered all over the place. CEJ plays a very important role, I think, in how we as scientists and social scientists and political scientists talk to the press, view the press, talk to media, etc. The CEJ has been extremely helpful in making those linkages for us. And I think it wraps up a larger picture of sustainability that we would miss very important parts if we didn't have the CEJ. It is an excellent program, so I think it does address points 1 through 4 on here. I don't know, and maybe, I don't know how well this is known around campus that there are these parts of journalism that do this, and maybe one of the things that you might want to think about is how do we better inform the rest of the campus about those linkages. There may be other ways to do this, maybe through that institute model, maybe through co-rostering faculty, maybe there are other things that we can do to show that interdisciplinary side of journalism that perhaps we don't see as much as we could. Finally, just a plea, the physician do no harm. I think we have a very viable and strong school of journalism. If we're going to do something with this, I would encourage us to make sure that we don't damage the ability of that unit to hire quality faculty. If there's any doubt among the pre-tenure faculty that their job is in danger, I think that's a huge negative and bad sign to be sent. And I think as we go through this process, we need to be very careful that we don't damage journalism if indeed we come out on the other end of this with either the same school or with something that still has the name journalism in it. Thank you for listening. Questions?
Jen?
Jim, first of all, I want to say I gotta love anybody who comes up to the microphone and starts quoting Shakespeare. I mean, I think that's for any others who are coming up, that's a really good strategy, at least for this member of the committee here.
English team, sure.
But I just want to say, Jim, thanks for putting the work of journalism in a larger context involving language use and the study of language and the ways in which language can be used and abused on campus. I think that's a very valuable suggestion.
Well, this committee won't be involved in figuring out new structures. If I could ask about the institute idea, you think there's, and I don't know whether you would know the answer to this question, is there sufficient funding to run an institute in an area such as this?
I would certainly think so. You'd have to pull the numbers and take a look at the grants, et cetera. As an example, the CEJ alone, their grant from Scripps is large.
Right.
Millions.
Over the last 14 years.
And I think if you look at the grants and contracts in communication, et cetera, I think there's also, keep in mind that the institute model is intended to grow research dollars in these areas via new synergies, new ways that people think about things. And those institutes provide an opportunity for people to get together and go, oh, holy smokes, this is what I could do that I didn't see I could do before, or this was the piece missing in an idea that I had. And that generates new funding. And I think we always expect for that to happen.
Thank you.
I know I spoke yesterday, and I won't take a lot of time because I'm sure other people want to speak, but what Jim addressed
If you could
was...
just re-identify.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. My name is Tom Yulsman. I'm co-director of the Center for Environmental Journalism and associate professor in the School of Journalism. So I just wanted to follow up on what Jim said, but also answer a question that was raised yesterday. You know, why do you think this happened to you? And it sort of leads to something that Jim talked about. By the way, I was not surprised at all. In fact, on the Sunday at a Sunday family dinner before the Wednesday when this was announced, I said, my wife asked me, you know, what's your week look like? And I said, well, I think on Wednesday the provost is coming to tell us that our program's being discontinued. And she will confirm that. The reason I thought that is not because I thought we have done something egregiously wrong, but because there's been a huge revolution in technology and in media that has changed the entire world. Okay, and as a university, not just the journalism school, as a university as a whole, we have not, and no one really has fully come to grips with this issue, right? This is much bigger than should we create a school of information or dissolve a school of journalism. Now, if I'm the chancellor of the University of Colorado, and thank goodness I'm not, I would be thinking, how do I deal with this? We need to do something. And the chancellor launched a process a year ago to come up with an answer. That process did not end terribly successfully. And so I'm still the chancellor and I want an answer to this. And this is perhaps one way to kickstart an answer. So now to get to something that Jim mentioned, there are really a couple of paths that could be taken here. One is the really bold path from the top down, deciding what the answer to this problem is, the revolution in technology and media, and how we adapt to it as a university. We'll appoint these committees, we'll make decisions from the top down, and determine the answer. Maybe it will be a really, really cool answer, but on the other hand, there are also some very large risks involved. One of the large risks was alluded to briefly by Jen, is that if you dissolve the School of Journalism, you run the risk of destroying things that actually have been successful and not being able to fully ramp them up in whatever new entity you create. Another option would be to allow a solution to come from the ground up. And an institute model, which is what Jim mentioned, is one way to do that. You allow people across this campus with similar interests to self-affiliate rather than to be told, you shall go to this new entity and do this and that. You allow them to self-affiliate and begin to evolve an answer to this incredibly complex and huge issue. That's not as sexy, it's not as bold, but it may be a way to deal. But let's face it, the media landscape is changing as I'm standing here speaking. So whatever model we devise is going to be different by the time we get to, the world is going to be different by the time we implement that model. An institute sort of a model of the kind Jim mentioned is one way to develop answers from the ground up that would allow faculty to determine how we adapt to this new world. Thank you.
My name is Brett Robbs, and I'm an associate professor in the school and also the head of the advertising sequence. I want to talk about three things, starting with the centrality of the program to the mission of the university. In advertising, and I'm going to focus there, your success in advertising depends only partly on what you know about advertising. It depends a lot about what you know about the world and the people who inhabit it. And the more you know about that, the more likely you are to be successful. One of my favorite headlines is for the Hyatt hotels, and it's aimed at business travelers, and the headline says, the next time your boss asks you to lead a Spartan existence on the road, remind her the Spartans lost the war. So, again, it's not just facts we know about the world, but it's also insights into people and what motivates them and understanding that. And so our program is designed to encourage people to know more about the world, to be curious, to be engaged. And that's really at the heart of a liberal arts education. Secondly, we teach people not only how to think creatively about advertising, but how to think creatively, period. The work of Csikszentmihalyi in Chicago, Amamale at Harvard, they're looking at a way of thinking which is rather different from traditional kind of analytical and critical thinking. And it's an equally important mode of thinking that helps turn students into creative problem solvers, which is a skill that they can use to solve advertising problems, but they can use and our students use to solve problems in a variety of other parts of society. So that's, again, I think part of what this mission is about, and you could easily argue that a course in creative thinking might be important as part of the undergraduate core to give students an awareness of the processes and how that works across the board. Second, the question three asks how we are enhancing the CU's national reputation. The advertising program was just named one of the country's renowned advertising programs by the American Association of Advertising Agencies, which is the leading professional organization. The one-show international college advertising competition draws 1,000 entries annually from around the world. Over the last 5 years, our students have won more awards in that competition than students at any other four-year university. That work is published in a hardcover annual alongside winning work from professionals, and it's available on Amazon, the Tattered Cover, the Boulder Bookstore. Students interested in the University of Colorado see us listed in that annual, and they come here, or that at least makes them interested. And we've won the top prize the last 3 years in the digital category, partly because of our connection with Atlas and the TAM program. TAM has given our students technical abilities, but we layer on top of that the creative thinking that you need. The technology is an important tool, but it has to be used in service of a creative idea. That combination has strengthened, I think, both us and also the students in TAM. There is real marketplace demand for our program. Students come to CU wanting to major in advertising. It's the only advertising program in the CU system. When I talk to 40% roughly of our students come from out of state. When I talk to them, and this is only anecdotal, why did you come here? It was for advertising. Did you think of other programs? Yes, we looked at Texas, we looked at Syracuse, we looked at Chapel Hill, we chose you. If this program didn't exist, one of the other programs on their short list would probably be the school they would select. Students in Colorado who may not be able to go outside the state or want to stay here for a variety of reasons would have to abandon their dream of studying advertising if this program did not exist. And finally, not everybody comes here trying to study advertising. Many students come here and discover it on the way. They know they're creative, but they're not a fine artist. They're not a painter. They're not perhaps a ballet dancer or an actor, but they know they have talent. And suddenly they discover this program and go, here's a place for me to exercise my abilities in a way that makes me happy and successful. And that's important. Agencies are also looking to hire students. We have been selected by Leo Burnett, the McDonald's agency, as only one of 5 programs they support nationwide with money, with internships, and with jobs. BBDO, the FedEx agency, invited our students as one of only 10 colleges selected to participate in a strategic challenge for this coming year. The Ad Age Agencies of the Year come to campus and recruit and hire our students. So we're not just placing students, we're placing students in the best programs in the country. And as Steve said, we have more applicants trying to get into the School of Journalism than into the advertising program than all the other sequences combined, and we can only accept about 40%. But I do have a concern. We have a momentum in terms of our national reputation, in terms of the students we're attracting to the campus, and the students that we're placing. But if you turn a switch off, it's not always easy to flip that switch back on. If you break the momentum, you could derail the kinds of accomplishments we are having and our students are having. And I think I hope that's something that you'll think about, along with all the other big questions that you're facing. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Questions for Brett? What percentage of the students are in advertising, do you know?
Just about
A third.
We keep roughly the numbers fairly even across the areas, right, as an intentional. So even though we have maybe so many applicants, we accept fewer than other sequences
right.
in order to keep the numbers even across the sequences. So we're an area of growth if we have the potential to grow.
Right. And could you speak to the relationship between advertising as a discipline and the other sequences in the school? So why advertising in a School of Journalism and Mass Communication?
Well, really it's, in a sense, a result of sort of a historical accident. The first program sort of appearing at the University of Missouri in 1908 as a result of the journalism program being launched there. Advertising was a revenue source. It also began to appear in business schools, but in the 60s there was a sort of a reevaluation of business curriculum, and they basically decided that they were not going to hold advertising as a program. It would be an elective. And so journalism schools suddenly said, this is an opportunity, let's grow the program. So its being there is sort of a result of just sort of happenstance. Is it a good relationship? Yes, in many ways, because there is creativity, there's involvement in writing, whether it's a story idea or an advertising idea, there's a creative germ there that has to lead to where you go. Journalism is more fact-based, we're more imaginative in certain ways in what you do with the fact. Though I guess maybe if you're in Fox News, you would say it's imaginative no matter where. But there, I think in terms of the certain basic skills in terms of writing, understanding the way words are used, understanding the power of persuasion. And interestingly, when you teach students to persuade others, you also teach them what allows others to persuade them. And understanding that gives you a critical perspective on the media, which is also, I think, important.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Susan Barney Jones. I'm the former editor of the former Silver and Gold Record, but I'm also an alum of the School of Journalism and Mass Comm, and I was an adjunct instructor in the program teaching basic reporting and reporting public affairs. I really appreciate Tom's remarks about that it's sort of the train of expanding media and the whole media environment changing that suddenly says, well, we don't need the word journalism anymore. We don't need to talk about journalists and the work they do. And it's we used to be people that just put out newspapers, then there was radio, then there was TV, now there's all the other technological communication sources. And nevertheless, people still have the desire for factual information and for coherent reporting and writing. So I, again, echo the idea, please don't take away the word journalism. Think about that when you're looking at what your recommendations are. Another thing that I've seen come up in the reporting about this proposal to discontinue the program is that people comment, well, you can get a lot of on-the-job training. You really don't need to learn how to be a reporter in a university setting. And in talking with various friends and family about this, people say, well, we could just say that about teaching. Let's not have a school of education. Let's just put people into the classroom and they'll learn on the job. And I have very practical experience of hiring reporters and trying to train people. And if I didn't have some people come in who at least knew the basics of journalism and interviewing and information gathering and testing their sources and editing and writing, that would be a lot of work for a busy newspaper environment or any kind of reporting media environment. So again, don't let that give you an answer for why you think the program ought to be discontinued. On-the-job training is not going to solve the problem of making good reporters in this nation. The other thing I wanted to talk about was that the school also has some real fingers out into the public environment with internships. At Silver and Gold Record, we always, each semester, had an intern working with us. Sometimes they didn't like the idea of working at the university newspaper, but they got to understand that it was really the similar environment to being a reporter. But the newspapers all around and the television stations and radio stations also have internships with the students from here. And I think that's a really broad example of how there's a connection out there for the school. And then the other thing is the faculty are consulted by lots of media professionals in lots of areas, and you can even notice that when some stories come up that have media questions arise, you'll be talking to the faculty here. I know that's a common thing with all the divisions around the university, but in that expertise about journalism and about the media environment, we are one of the only places in the entire state where those kind of questions can be asked and faculty can respond. So those are my comments. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. If I could just make one, we're here to listen, not to make comments, but I'm going to make one comment because several people, this isn't a question for you, just several people have said, seem concerned about keeping the word journalism in whatever entity exists. No one's made any decisions about anything, including whether or not we will continue to have something called journalism. I believe that the Chancellor and the Provost, in naming the exploratory committee, were trying to come up with broad and general terms that didn't predetermine outcomes. So if, for example, it had been called the School of Information Task Force, schools of information mean something in particular on lots of campuses. If it was called the Journalism Task Force, it would suggest it was only about journalism, but it's actually about all those kind of interconnections that people have been talking to. So we're all very intense critical readers, so we pay a whole lot of attention to these kinds of things, but sometimes people just got to come up with a name and move on, and information and communication and technology, we shouldn't overparse the meaning of those words. It was, if we could have called it the big we don't know what it is exploratory committee, I think that's what we would have done.
And for the close readers in the room, I would point out in the Chancellor's initial press release, the words, the ICT words that are so scary, were in lowercase, which I think was a deliberate attempt to keep from precluding what the final nomenclature would look like.
Hi, I'm Sandra Fish. I'm an instructor in the School of Journalism. I'm also I'm a professional. I'm a correspondent for politicsdaily.com, an AOL news site that covers politics nationally. And I do want to get to the word of journalism, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the really large importance of journalism in a democratic society. And this is something I talk to my students in all my classes. I primarily teach reporting classes. I also teach principles of journalism. You know, journalism is here to inform citizens in a democracy and give them information that they've got to know to be productive and active citizens. I think that's something that I hope that you and the exploratory committee will take seriously, because I certainly do. You know, our role as journalists in building community is really huge, and providing information to that community. I think if you look at some of the communication going on around the wildfire in the past few days, I know I, as a journalist, have acted as somebody transmitting information via Twitter to the community. There's a whole community of both journalists, computer scientists from CU. Later today I'm going to go over to EPIC and hang out in their labs for a while and talk to them about the mapping that they're doing and some other things that I think I could help them do. You know, I'm hoping as a journalism instructor to use these examples of how technology has changed and how quickly information moves now to show my journalism students how they need to use this technology and how important it is to keep citizens in our democracy informed of what's happening out there. I think that's, you know, a key role that you and the exploratory committee need to consider. I'd also like to mention the fact that beyond students who want to become journalists or professional communications people, I think that our students at the university as a whole, we need to be training them to become savvy, informed consumers of media. I would love to see more non-journalism students take my Principles of Journalism lecture, or when Tom takes it, take that lecture to understand what journalists do or should do to get the facts of a story, to verify those facts, to act ethically, and to be able to analyze the difference between a reported piece of work and something that's mere commentary or opinion, and to determine whether or not that opinion or commentary is based on facts or not. And I think that it's really important for our students as a whole to be good consumers of news and information. And I think there needs to be a role for that, either in the continuance of our program or in any sort of new program that comes along. I'd also add, as an aside, I'm co-teaching a class out of the business school this semester called, can I say this without Entrepreneurial Adventures in Journalism. Co-teaching it with Frank Moyes from the business school. We've got a combination of advertising and a range of journalism students in that class, and that's something I'm hoping that we can continue within the school, or what comes next, to give our students ideas about how they can go out there on their own, because really the cutting edge is not so much in legacy media like large newspaper companies. The cutting edge is out there in people doing things like jobs like news technologists. Some of those people are doing it in legacy media companies, but not in this region. You know, there's a huge area to be explored out there that's essential to the citizens in our democracy.
Thank you.
I'm Deborah Hollis, and I'm head of special collections in the library. And yesterday there was a mention of revision to the curriculum. And can someone speak to some of that work? Polly?
My name is McLean. I'm the chair of the Undergraduate Curriculum Committee, and I'm in the School of Journalism, and I want to thank you for your hard work on this. And I know it's not easy. I have read and spoken to most of the people at the 111 schools that are accredited in the United States of America. I did not do the one in Peru. I've also looked at schools of information across the country, beginning in the summer of 2009. In December of 2009, the faculty, in a shared governing process, adopted unanimously a complete revised curriculum. Our curriculum matched not only the AAU peers, but those that are the CCHE peers, and we've kicked it up a notch. So we are indeed further ahead even than CSU in terms of curriculum, because they've already done theirs, and we're able to look at our competition, not only at CSU, but I've also looked at Arizona, at the schools there, and across the United States. The curriculum has changed dramatically. It involves high use of technology in terms of teaching multimedia skills to our students. Some of that has already been in progress, in that people have already begun to integrate that. That curriculum would be, the new curriculum would officially kick off in 2012, being sent to the catalog in this year in November. It creates greater, it also includes a minor in journalism for the entire campus. It includes specializations that our students at no other school, especially within our region, are doing. For example, a student may indeed take an emphasis in international, taking a course on international reporting, taking a course on war, disaster, and peace journalism, international war, disasters, and peace journalism, the global courses, etc. So it is, by all standards, and I've spoken to deans across the country, it is highly competitive, progressive, and one that I think would make this institution proud. Specific things you would like to ask me about it, I can address. We have also, by the way, done something in terms of the divisions we've originally had: news editorial, broadcast news, broadcast production, media studies, have been combined now. So we're looking at journalism and media studies. All of our students will leave prepared with the research. We've added in courses such as research methods for journalists. We've added in the multimedia. We've added in a core curriculum that only about 5 of our peers are doing at this point, which is we've upgraded the number of courses a student will take in terms of core. So it has an enormous capacity, and I think it's something that all of you would be quite interested to see how it was done. It was extreme, and you know my reports. Very detailed, 53 pages of a report on the change of the journalism curriculum to satisfy what we've heard. We interviewed alumni across the country. The advisory board members were interviewed on this. We interviewed our students. Over the course of 2 years, actually, we interviewed our students, the incoming classes. So we're looking at a well-developed and structured curriculum that our students will be taking at this point. And a lot of connections and relationships with units across the campus, etc. Are there any questions? I also, by the way, wanted to just mention that one of the things that was so evident in doing this is that, for example, Berkeley is one of our peers and one that we look towards. From the moment I arrived on campus, I was told we have to be like Berkeley. So that has always been something in my head. And I looked at Berkeley, for example, they have sustained a graduate journalism program along with their School of Information, which are separate.
Let me ask, from your perspective, to administer well this new curriculum, do you see any advantages, disadvantages of it being delivered from a school versus a college?
A disadvantage, and by the way, there are members of that committee here, Brett, for example, that Mike, and faculty who are quite well vested in terms of answering, since they were all integrally involved.
So if there wasn't the School of Journalism and maybe the whole program was transferred to some new college or existing college.
And we a department within that is what
or
you would
whatever. So do you see, you know, the administrative structure in those terms impacting one way or the other?
Well, I don't know about impacting in that sense. I don't know if Steve has any thoughts on that. I don't know that answer.
I could add.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
Steve, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking of a couple of smaller examples, but it's often the case when there are campus opportunities. So an example would be a first scholar, which is a summer school. I think the amount of money is like a $15,000 grant to bring in one person to teach a course. So in a case like that, I think there's an accommodation made so that if A&S gets 5 and engineering gets 4, journalism will at least get 1. And that kind of advantage of being a school up there with other entities, I think you see that happening again and again. I think we've
and we've used our first scholars to bring in some of those new kinds of, you know, curriculum in terms of bringing them, you know, et cetera. So you understand that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Mike had a question.
Yes, Polly, I'd like to know if the new curriculum was available to the advisory board when they made their recommendation.
It should have been. It was unanimously, I don't know. I'm not an administrator, so I couldn't answer that. But it was unanimously voted in December of 2009, and I would almost believe they should have seen it. Definitely. And they were part of the group that we indeed asked the questions. What would you like to see a new curriculum? What were they? And we went outside of that. So we interviewed alum across the nation.
Sam?
I just wanted to ask the question you mentioned at the end about the new curriculum involving more relationships with other units on campus. And I guess I'd like to know what those units are.
Religious studies is an example. One of our courses that has already been taught as a special topics will now be part of the curriculum, and it's religion and the media. And that involves giving them certain numbers of students can take that course, as well as us. We already have a course that will be now called Gender, Race, Class, and Sexuality in Popular Culture. That is already cross-listed with women's studies, women and gender studies. We have the political, in your area, I believe, we have courses that what happened with the new curriculum as we went through it, we've designated certain faculty members to work with certain units in terms of those courses that cross, and that, you know, we have political communication as an example. And that course, we have our 2 faculty members who have been charged to talk with poli-sci about us crossing that. So it has a lot of opportunities to create the kind of synergy that exists and the kinds of relationships that we have been building, but now it is in. Yeah.
Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Stuart.
I spoke yesterday, but I'll just reintroduce myself. I'm Stuart Hoover. I'm a professor in the school. I didn't say yesterday that I did spend 2 18-month terms as interim dean of the school 6 years ago, so I have the school from a lot of different perspectives. In part because I think part of what we need to do for your process is to fly the school's flag, which we've all been doing so successfully. I want to do that a little bit more with the unit that I'm most involved in the school, which is the other center besides the CEJ, the Center for Media, Religion, and Culture. And I would say many of the same things about that unit that Jim White and Tom and Len have said about the CEJ. The Center for Media, Religion, and Culture is one of only 3 institutes in the United States focused on media and religion, and we're unique among the 3. The other 2 are at NYU and at USC. We're unique among the 3 in being the center that conducts research primarily in the area of media and religion. We're also unique among the centers in having 2 full-time faculty members associated with the center, myself and my colleague Nabil Chaibi, assistant professor in the school, who's sitting here in the room as well. I guess I would start by saying what the growth and the development of the area that the center focuses on, that is interactions and relations between religion and media, has really taken off since September 11th, 2001, you can imagine. I don't have a hobby and I don't have a personal life in the last 10 years, just because of the amount of demands that we have. And if you look at the issue, the question, for instance, of programs that bring national or international reputation to the university, our center certainly does. I think Nabil and I both would have the same experience. We both have in any year more opportunities to speak in Europe than we're able to take, just because you can't travel that much. It's impossible. And it's because this is seen to be a critical need, more so in Europe almost than the United States, because of the different patterns of religious immigration in Europe, et cetera, but of a growing concern and interest in the US. And just as an example, I would say, it's not really possible to understand the Islamic Center at the World Trade Center controversy, or the controversy over the burning of Qurans in Florida, or things like that, without understanding those as media issues. And it's not only the framing of those things by journalism as a formal framing sort of practice, it's also all the ways that the mediation of experience in contemporary life, that is largely industrial, commodified, mechanical, et cetera, is changing the way we live as a national, as regional, and as global community. And that the role of religion in that is a very important role. Subtle, complex, layered, but just the sort of things scholars should be looking at. Just a couple of other things about the center. In the time, in the years that we have been doing this work at CU, we have received grants, private foundation grants from Ford, from the Lilly Endowment, funding also from the Social Science Research Council, from the Stichting Porticus Foundation in Amsterdam, totaling around $2 million up to this point. We just received a $300,000 grant from the Ford Foundation, that's starting right now, to do a study that we call Finding Religion in the Media, reconceptualizing the way we think about the media sphere as a place where religion and spirituality happen, and new forms of religion and new politics of religion and new practices of religion are generated. On that project, we have assembled an interdisciplinary research team. Nabil and I are, of course, leading the project, but we have a faculty member from religious studies and a faculty member from communication who are also part of the research team, and students from the religious studies department, graduate students who are also involved, in addition to our own graduate students. So we've always been very much an interdisciplinary kind of process and discourse and dialogue. And I think Nabil would also agree with me that as we engage in scholarly discourse about this issue and public discourse about this issue, it is by definition an interdisciplinary kind of discourse. So we're always interacting with art historians, political scientists, sociologists, folklorists, religious studies scholars, anthropologists, et cetera, in trying to get our heads around this very complex area of kind of the generation of new forms of religion in modernity. So that's what I'll say about flying the flag. I wanted also to respond to John's question of yesterday about why we find ourselves in this position. Would you mind if I went ahead with that? I don't want to get too much into the weeds, and there are aspects of that question which are very complicated or probably not the sort of thing you try to deal with in a setting like this. But I do want to say what I think the range of conditions are that have put us in the position we're in. One of them is that we've never really been able to satisfy a combination of industry and alumni expectations for what the school should be, in part because we're such a small unit and have been such a small unit at a university and in a field which is represented. The flagship units in journalism and mass communication tend to be larger, better funded, and more significant at their university. The exceptions I would say actually are Columbia and Berkeley, which are exceptional journalism programs, but largely graduate only, and we have an undergraduate program. So we have industry and alumni who think of journalism education along the lines of Missouri. And a model like Missouri, or Temple University, where I came from, where the School of Communications and Theater, 5 departments, 7 graduate programs, the second largest college on the campus. We're not like that. We've never been like that. And we've never actually been able to get sort of out of that. We've also had the problem in terms of thinking about industries, which industries we serve, the question of which industries we serve. It's not only journalism, it's also advertising, it's also sports communication, it's also a wide range of things that our alumni have ended up doing. I mean, I'd say only a minority of them have ended up doing daily print journalism. Secondly, I think we allowed ourselves to be defined a bit too narrowly. I think we have not done a good enough public relations job on campus in explaining how and where and under what circumstances and in what conditions the scholarly and creative work activity in the school enhances our education. And that's just been that's a communication problem that I think we've had amongst ourselves and on the campus. So when the narrow definition of the school is being largely about print journalism, when the J, that is a J school, a term that I myself hate. I'll just have to say, I do not like calling it the J school. I don't like it to be called the J school. If you want to really annoy me, call it the J school. Okay, so, but when the J industry seems to be going away, then a J school is easy to do without. And there's a level on which, a very superficial level on which that, I think, is part of the discourse around this. I think we never did grow. We had opportunities to grow. We probably had opportunities that we could have pursued, but we are actually too small to achieve the kind of critical mass on the campus that we needed. And that's in part because the campus itself never really solved the technology problem. I've been here about 19 years, and the whole time I've been here, there has been some form of another conversation going on outside the school about what to do about emerging media technology. It's now expressed in the form of the Atlas Institute or the Atlas Alliance, the Alliance, but it's had other had other forms before, and it's partly a Colorado problem in that the driving media industries in Colorado, there have been technology industries around media, but Colorado is the center of the cable industry. Colorado is the center. Then the entertainment media industries have been the really big story in Colorado for the last 20 or 25 years. Not IT, but entertainment. But the University of Colorado had a huge competitor in getting industry support, getting both financial and moral and political and otherwise support in the University of Denver, whose chancellor came out of that industry and essentially was able to corral resources and interests and attention that the school and the University of Colorado were never able to do. I will say finally, student interest in media education remains very high. I think we'll continue to find that. I think the complexities of the field into which they're being pushed and they're going when they go to out to have careers, which industries, which activities, which professional areas they go into. That's not the answer. The answer is not in looking there for what kind of education we should do. It's up to us who have the pedagogic responsibility of working at a research university. It is up to us to design a curriculum that takes advantage of the context of the research university to define what media education ought to be at a research university. It's not up to the industries, it's not up to the press, it's not up to the media, it's up to us to decide. Thank you.
Are there questions for Stuart? Could I ask just one? So, if part of the problem is an issue of size, does that suggest that moving forward it would actually be to the advantage of the faculty in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication to be part, I'm not saying part of a huge unit like Arts and Sciences, but part of a larger concatenation of units that would be grouped around?
I think so. Yeah, I would say yes, unequivocally. I can't see either having the personnel or the intellectual or the financial resources to be able to address the challenge we've got with the size of unit that we have, and that's just always been a problem. It's not just a matter of being so small in the context of the campus. It's kind of the critical mass of thinking and other kinds of resources you need to have to be able to pursue these kinds of goals. That's the problem, I think. And I think the thing I'm excited about, I mean, I think all of us are kind of, annoyed about how this was announced, et cetera, but are all open to development, because I think all of us in some sense see lots of opportunities for the right kind of new version of what we've been doing.
Thank you. We've got a few minutes left if there's anybody else who wished to speak. Do we have any burning questions? All right.
This was very helpful today. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all very much for coming. Please let your students know that there will be 2 open sessions next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, 3 to 5 here. We look forward to hearing from them. We'll be meeting with the SJMC's staff next week, and there'll be other focused meetings. If you have further thoughts for the committee, please use input@colorado.edu. Have a good day.